"Can you pretend to be my wife for a week?" the giant rancher said to the too fat black settler woman, desperation cracking his voice as dust swirled between them in the unforgiving Wyoming heat. The townsfolk had already decided her fate, eternal exile from respectable society, worthy only of scraps and scorn. Store owners refused her coins, children hurled stones at her worn boots, and even the preacher averted his eyes when she passed. She was expected to disappear quietly into the wilderness, another broken dream claimed by the frontier's cruelty. But the towering cattleman saw something else entirely. His family's ranch hung by a thread, 1 week from foreclosure unless he could prove himself a settled family man to the bank's rigid moral standards. Neither knew that accepting this desperate bargain would expose a conspiracy threatening to destroy them both, or that their greatest weapons lay hidden beneath society's crushing assumptions. Would this unlikely alliance reveal the truth that could save them? Or would their deception crumble under the weight of a community determined to see them fail? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. Adelaide Jenkins stepped off the dusty wagon train into Clearwater Ridge with nothing but hope and a worn carpetbag. The Wyoming Territory sun beat down mercilessly as she approached the first building on Main Street. The general store owner took one look at her dark skin and ample figure before shaking his head. His wife appeared beside him, lips pursed in disgust. "We don't serve your kind here." Adelaide's stomach twisted, but she kept her voice steady. "I have money to pay." "Stores closed." The wooden sign clearly read "Open." Adelaide nodded politely and moved to the next establishment. The blacksmith pretended not to hear her questions about work. The seamstress slammed her door. By evening, Adelaide found herself sleeping in Murphy's stable. Grateful the old man charged only 50 cents for a pile of hay. 3 days passed in similar fashion. Children threw pebbles at her boots while their mothers whispered behind gloved hands. Men at the saloon made crude jokes loud enough for her to hear. The preacher's wife suggested she might find more suitable company elsewhere. Adelaide had endured worse. She swept the barbershop for scraps of bread. She mended torn shirts for pennies. She smiled when spoken to and kept her head high when ignored. Meanwhile, Jackson Holloway faced his own crisis 6 miles outside town. The massive rancher stood nearly 7 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to carry a full-grown calf. His calloused hands shook as he read the bank notice for the 3rd time. 1 week, 7 days to prove his financial stability and moral character, or lose the Triple Crown Ranch forever. His father had built this spread from nothing. 3 generations of Holloways had worked this land, survived harsh winters and drought years. The cattle operation supported 12 families in the valley. Without it, they would all scatter to the wind. Jackson crumpled the notice and hurled it across the kitchen. The banker's words echoed in his memory. A man of 32 with no wife, no family ties, represented poor moral character. The bank preferred to do business with settled family men. The irony burned. Jackson had devoted every waking moment to the ranch. Romance seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford. Now that dedication might cost him everything. He saddled his horse and rode toward town, desperate for solutions that didn't exist. Adelaide was leaving the general store empty-handed when it happened. Mrs. Henderson emerged from the mercantile, arms full of packages. A small boy darted between the wooden posts, chasing a rolling hoop. Mrs. Henderson stumbled, her purchases scattering across the dirt. Adelaide rushed to help, gathering spilled flour and scattered beans. Mrs. Henderson looked mortified. "Oh my, I'm terribly clumsy today." "Happens to everyone," Adelaide replied, dusting off a sack of sugar. "Thank you." "Dear, you're very kind." Other townspeople gathered, watching the interaction with disapproval. Mrs. Henderson noticed their stares and stepped back quickly, her warmth evaporating. "Yes, well, good day." She hurried away, leaving Adelaide alone with the hostile crowd. A woman in an expensive hat sniffed audibly. Some people have no sense of proper boundaries. Adelaide's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. This was the pattern everywhere. Brief moments of human connection followed by swift retreats when others appeared. She was a stain on their respectability. Jackson witnessed the entire scene from his horse. He'd come to town hoping to find a solution, maybe convince someone to vouch for his character. Instead, he watched a woman show more grace under pressure than most men he knew. The crowd dispersed, leaving Adelaide standing alone. Jackson dismounted and approached slowly. His size often intimidated people. The woman glanced up, showing no fear despite his towering frame. "That was decent of you," he said, "just being neighborly." Her voice carried education and dignity. Jackson studied her face, noting intelligence in her dark eyes. An impossible idea began forming in his mind. "You're new in town." "Few days now." "Finding work?" Adelaide's laugh held no humor. "Not exactly." Jackson's desperation overcame his usual caution. The bank inspection was in 6 days. He needed a wife, or at least the appearance of one. This woman needed acceptance, protection from the town's cruelty. Perhaps they could help each other. "I have a proposition," he said carefully. Adelaide tensed, expecting the worst kind of offer. Men in previous towns had made similar approaches, assuming her circumstances made her available for unsavory arrangements. "I need a favor," Jackson continued. "A business arrangement. Nothing improper." "What kind of business?" Jackson glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. The street had mostly cleared as dinner hour approached. "The bank's foreclosing on my ranch unless I can prove moral character. They want to see a family man, someone settled and responsible." Adelaide frowned, not understanding. "Can you pretend to be my wife for a week?" The words hung between them like smoke from a gunshot. Adelaide stared at this giant stranger, processing his impossible request. Marriage, even fake marriage, to a white rancher would cause a scandal that could destroy them both. But sleeping in stables and begging for scraps wasn't much of a life either. "What would you pay?" $50? Plus a letter of recommendation for work anywhere you choose. $50 represented more money than she'd seen in months. A recommendation from a respected rancher might open doors throughout the territory. 1 week, 7 days, just until the bank inspection. Adelaide looked toward the hostile town, then back at Jackson's weathered face. His desperation was genuine. His offer, while dangerous, might be her only chance at something better. "All right, Mr. Holloway. You have yourself a wife." Adelaide settled into the ranch house with careful movements, aware that every action mattered now. Jackson had given her the spare bedroom and explained the basic story they would tell. Childhood sweethearts reunited after years apart. Simple enough to remember under pressure. She unpacked her few belongings while Jackson tended to evening chores. The house felt enormous compared to boarding rooms and stable corners. A real kitchen with a cast-iron stove, windows with actual glass, furniture that wasn't broken or stained. Her leather satchel caught on the dresser edge as she lifted it. The contents spilled across the wooden floor in a cascade of papers and bills. Adelaide dropped to her knees, frantically gathering everything before Jackson returned. Too late. His boots appeared in the doorway. Jackson stared at the scattered banknotes and legal documents, $20 bills mixed with property deeds and investment certificates. More money than most people saw in a lifetime. "You're not poor." Adelaide's hands shook as she stuffed papers back into the satchel. The charade was over before it began. He would throw her out, find someone else, leave her with nothing again. "I can explain. You've been lying since we met." The accusation stung because it was true. Adelaide had perfected the art of appearing destitute, desperate, grateful for any scraps of kindness. The performance protected her from fortune hunters and false friends. "My employer back east left me his estate," she said quietly. "Mr. Whitmore was a lawyer. I cared for him for 8 years before he passed." Jackson picked up a bank certificate. The amount made his eyes widen. "Why pretend to be broke?" "Because money changes everything. People see dollar signs instead of a person. They become friendly real quick when they want something." Adelaide's voice carried years of bitter experience, distant relatives appearing after the will reading, neighbors suddenly interested in friendship, suitors with empty pockets and smooth words. "I travel this way to find people who might accept me for who I am, Not what I have." Jackson studied her face, looking for deception. He found only exhaustion and loneliness that matched his own. How much of it was real? Your gratitude for work, the sleeping in stables? All of it. Money doesn't buy acceptance. Doesn't stop people from treating you like dirt because of how you look. She gestured toward the window facing town. Even with wealth, she remained unwelcome in stores, churches, and social gatherings. Currency couldn't change the color of her skin or society's judgments. Jackson handed back the certificate. His anger faded as understanding dawned. They were both pretending to be something they weren't. Him playing the desperate man, her the grateful pauper. Were even then, both liars, both trying to survive. They spent the evening working out details of their fictional marriage. Jackson struggled with numbers, so Adelaide helped calculate feed costs and cattle projections. Her mathematical skills impressed him. Most women he knew could barely manage household accounts. "Where did you learn this?" "Mr. Whitmore taught me. Said I had a mind for legal work, but the world wasn't ready for that yet." Adelaide had spent years reading law books, helping with case research, drafting correspondence. Whitmore treated her as an intellectual equal rather than hired help. His death had ended the only respectful employment she'd ever known. The next morning brought their first test. Tommy Martinez, the young ranch hand, arrived for work and stopped dead, seeing Adelaide at the breakfast table. "Boss, you didn't mention you got married." "Recent development," Jackson said carefully. Tommy grinned and tipped his hat to Adelaide. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Holloway." The name felt strange, but Adelaide smiled back. Tommy seemed genuinely happy for his employer, showing none of the town's hostility. They rode into Clearwater Ridge together that afternoon, Jackson's hand resting protectively on Adelaide's back as they entered the general store. The same clerk who had refused her service days earlier now forced a smile. "Mr. Holloway, how can I help you today?" "Need supplies for the missus. She'll be handling the household accounts from now on." The clerk's smile faltered as he processed this information. Adelaide stepped forward with a shopping list, her posture confident rather than apologetic. "I'll need these items. Quality goods, not the scraps you might usually offer." Her tone was polite but firm. The clerk had no choice but to comply, though his movements were stiff with resentment. Other customers whispered among themselves, struggling to understand this development. Mrs. Catherine Penwell swept into the store like a storm cloud. The banker's wife had appointed herself guardian of the town's moral standards. Her sharp eyes took in every detail of Adelaide and Jackson's interaction. "Mr. Holloway, I heard the most interesting news about a recent wedding." "Word travels fast." "Indeed it does." "My husband will be very interested to learn about your new domestic situation." Her tone suggested suspicion rather than congratulation. Adelaide felt the weight of scrutiny, but maintained her composure. This woman would be their greatest challenge. "We'd be honored to have you both for Sunday dinner," Adelaide said smoothly. "I'm eager to become part of this community." Mrs. Penwell's eyebrows rose at the invitation. She had expected submission or defensiveness, not confident hospitality. "How generous. We'll discuss it with Pastor Williams. I'm sure he'd want to meet your new bride properly." The challenge was clear. Adelaide and Jackson would face examination by the town's moral authorities. Any inconsistency in their story would expose the deception. That evening, Adelaide found Jackson staring at account books in frustrated silence. Numbers swam across the pages in incomprehensible patterns. She sat beside him and began organizing the figures into clear columns. "Your cattle operation is actually quite profitable," she said, pointing to calculations. "The bank should have no concerns about financial stability." Jackson watched her work with growing amazement. Her quick mind made sense of problems that had plagued him for months. This woman wasn't just intelligent, she was brilliant. "Why are you really here, Adelaide? Someone with your education and money could live anywhere." Adelaide's pen paused over the ledger. The honest answer felt too vulnerable to speak aloud. She was searching for a place where her mind mattered more than her appearance, where respect wasn't contingent on constant performance. "Maybe I'm tired of pretending to be less than I am." Jackson nodded slowly. He understood that particular exhaustion better than most. Day 4 of their arrangement brought unexpected challenges. Adelaide woke to find Jackson already gone, handling a sick calf in the far pasture. She prepared breakfast alone, listening to Tommy whistling as he mucked the stalls. Mrs. Henderson appeared at the kitchen door, clutching her shawl nervously. The widow looked thinner than Adelaide remembered from their brief encounter in town. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mrs. Holloway. I heard you might have some eggs to spare." Adelaide noticed the woman's hollow cheeks and worn clothing. Mrs. Henderson's husband had died in a mining accident last winter, leaving her with 3 children and mounting debts. "Of course. How many do you need?" "Just a few. I can pay next week when my sewing work comes in." Adelaide packed a dozen eggs and added a loaf of fresh bread. Mrs. Henderson's eyes filled with gratitude as she accepted the basket. "Bless you. The children have been so hungry." After the widow left, Adelaide found herself restless with purpose. She rode into town and quietly paid the doctor's bill for Mrs. Henderson's youngest child. The boy had been sick with fever for weeks. Then she stopped at the mercantile and arranged credit for the Martinez family, whose farm had struggled after drought destroyed their crops. Jackson found her in the kitchen that evening, counting remaining money from her satchel. His expression was stern. "Tommy says you were handing out charity all over town today. People are struggling. People are always struggling. That doesn't make their problems yours to solve." Adelaide bristled at his tone. She had spent her own money helping families in genuine need. What right did he have to criticize her generosity? "I can afford to help. It's not about money, it's about patterns." Jackson pulled out a chair and sat across from her. His voice gentled, but remained serious. "You've been doing this your whole life, haven't you? Trying to buy acceptance with kindness." The observation cut deep because it was accurate. Adelaide had learned early that being useful made people tolerate her presence. Helping others felt safer than demanding respect for herself. What's wrong with helping people? Nothing, when it comes from the right place. But you're helping because you think it'll make them like you. It won't. Jackson's bluntness stung, but Adelaide recognized truth in his words. Mrs. Henderson had been grateful but distant. The doctor had taken her payment without thanks. The mercantile owner had pocketed her money while barely acknowledging her presence. So I should just let them suffer? You should help when you want to help, not when you think you have to. The distinction seemed subtle but felt profound. Adelaide had never considered that her compulsive generosity might stem from desperation rather than compassion. The next morning brought their greatest test yet. The church social would gather the entire community to judge their marriage. Adelaide chose her best dress and practiced the story they had rehearsed. Childhood sweethearts separated by circumstances, reunited by fate. The church basement buzzed with conversation that stopped when they entered. Every eye tracked their movement as Jackson guided Adelaide to a table near the front. Mrs. Penwell approached with predatory purpose. How wonderful to see newlyweds still in their honeymoon phase. Adelaide smiled serenely, despite the woman's suspicious tone. "We're very blessed." "Indeed. Tell me, how long have you two known each other?" "Since we were children. Our families were neighbors before mine moved east." "How romantic that you found each other again. What brought you back to Wyoming?" The questions came rapid fire, designed to trip them up. Adelaide answered smoothly, weaving their fictional history with practiced ease. Jackson added supporting details that made their story convincing. Other women joined the interrogation, asking about wedding details and future plans. Adelaide fielded every question with grace, never contradicting Jackson or revealing uncertainty. Pastor Williams approached their table during dessert. The elderly minister's kind eyes assessed their interaction carefully. "Marriage is a sacred commitment, Mr. Holloway. I trust you both understand the responsibilities involved." "We do, Pastor." "Good. Mrs. Penwell mentioned you might benefit from some guidance on biblical marriage roles. Perhaps we could schedule counseling sessions." Adelaide's stomach clenched. Extended examination would expose their deception eventually. Jackson's jaw tightened with similar concern. "We appreciate the offer, but we're still settling into ranch life. Of course, but don't let practical concerns overshadow spiritual ones. The pastor's gentle warning felt like a threat. They were walking a tightrope with the entire community, watching for them to fall. That evening, Jackson found Adelaide on the porch, staring at stars scattered across the endless sky. The social had exhausted them both with its constant performance. "We fooled them tonight," he said, settling beside her on the wooden steps. "Did we? Or are they just waiting for us to slip up?" The vulnerability in her voice surprised him. Throughout the evening, she had seemed unshakable. Now he saw the cost of maintaining that facade. "What scares you most about this?" he asked. Adelaide considered the question carefully. The obvious answers were exposure, humiliation, exile from yet another community. But deeper fears lurked beneath those surface concerns. "I'm scared that even fake acceptance feels better than real rejection." Her honesty created unexpected intimacy between them. Jackson understood that particular fear intimately. His own isolation had lasted so long that even temporary companionship felt precious. "It's not fake anymore, though, is it?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither dared cross. Their business arrangement had evolved into something more complex, more dangerous to their carefully guarded hearts. Adelaide turned to study his profile in the moonlight. This giant man who defended her in public and challenged her in private, who saw through her masks but didn't demand she remove them. Jackson. Adelaide. They leaned closer. Drawn by magnetic force, neither could name. His hand touched her cheek with surprising gentleness. Her eyes fluttered closed as his lips moved toward hers. The sound of galloping horses shattered the moment. Tommy rode hard toward the house, his face grim with urgent news. "Boss, we got trouble. Cattle down by the creek are sick, might be poison water." Jackson was on his feet instantly, the romantic moment forgotten. Adelaide watched him transform from gentle suitor to commanding rancher in seconds. "Saddle my horse. We ride now." As the men disappeared into darkness, Adelaide remained on the porch. Her fingers touched her lips, where his kiss had almost landed. Tomorrow would bring the bank inspection that would determine everything. Tonight had almost changed everything else. Dawn broke cold and merciless on inspection day. Adelaide prepared breakfast with trembling hands, while Jackson shaved in silence. 7 days of pretense had led to this moment. Everything they had worked for, balanced on the edge of a knife. The banker arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, accompanied by Mrs. Penwell and 2 town council members. Mr. Cornelius Blackwood rode behind them, his expensive suit and calculating eyes out of place on the dusty ranch. Jackson greeted them with forced confidence while Adelaide smoothed her best dress one final time. The inspection began in the barn, where Jackson demonstrated his knowledge of cattle breeding and feed management. The banker nodded approvingly at the healthy livestock and organized operations. "Impressive herd, Holloway. Your father would be proud." They moved to the house, where Adelaide served coffee and answered questions about domestic arrangements. She spoke knowledgeably about household budgets and meal planning, presenting herself as a capable ranch wife. Mrs. Penwell examined everything with suspicious eyes, looking for inconsistencies in their story. She opened cupboards and peered into bedrooms, searching for evidence of deception. "How lovely that you've settled so quickly into married life," she said with false sweetness. "Adelaide has a gift for making any place feel like home," Jackson replied, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. The inspection seemed to be going well until Blackwood stepped forward with predatory purpose. His smile was cold as winter wind. "This is all very touching, but I'm afraid there's been some deception here." The banker frowned at the interruption. "What do you mean, Mr. Blackwood? These two aren't really married. The whole thing is an elaborate charade designed to fool your inspection." Adelaide's blood turned to ice. Jackson's jaw clenched with barely controlled anger. Their week of careful performance crumbled in an instant. "That's a serious accusation," the banker said slowly. "I have witnesses. People who saw them meet for the first time just days ago. People who heard them negotiating this arrangement." Mrs. Penwell's eyes gleamed with vindictive satisfaction. She had suspected the truth from the beginning, and now felt validated in her suspicions. "Well, Mr. Holloway, what do you say to these charges?" Jackson could have denied everything, but Adelaide saw defeat in his shoulders. The truth was written across his face for anyone to read. "It started as business," he admitted quietly. The banker shook his head with disappointment. "I'm afraid this changes everything. The loan application is denied." "Wait." Blackwood's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "There's more you should know about this property." He produced a leather folder thick with documents. His smile widened as he savored the moment of revelation. Jackson's father built this ranch on stolen land. The original deed was forged 30 years ago. This property legally belongs to the federal government. The words hit like physical blows. Jackson staggered backward, his face drained of color. 3 generations of family legacy reduced to worthless paper and false claims. "That's impossible," Jackson whispered. "I have documentation proving the fraud. Survey maps, witness statements, legal precedents. Your father was a clever thief, but not clever enough." The banker examined the papers with growing alarm. If the land ownership was questionable, the bank's mortgage became worthless. They could lose everything invested in the property. "This puts us in a very difficult position," the banker muttered. Blackwood's triumph was complete. He had exposed their fake marriage and destroyed Jackson's claim to the ranch simultaneously. Now he could purchase the worthless foreclosed property and claim legitimate federal ownership for himself. "Of course, I'd be willing to buy the land from the bank at a fair price, save you the legal complications." Adelaide watched this destruction unfold with growing fury. She had seen Blackwood's type before, men who used law and money as weapons against honest people. Men who destroyed lives for profit. She stepped forward with quiet authority that commanded attention. "Mr. Blackwood, may I examine your documentation?" "I hardly think that's necessary. You have no legal standing here." "Actually, I do. As Jackson's wife, I have property rights regardless of how we met." Her voice carried newfound confidence that surprised everyone present. This was not the submissive woman they expected, but someone with knowledge and purpose. "Let her see the papers," Jackson said firmly. He had watched Adelaide's legal mind work all week. If anyone could find flaws in Blackwood's scheme, she could. Reluctantly, Blackwood handed over the folder. Adelaide spread the documents across the kitchen table, her trained eyes scanning every line and signature. Years of working with Mr. Whitmore had taught her to spot legal inconsistencies. She examined survey maps, compared dates, cross-referenced witness statements. The others watched in fascination as she worked with methodical precision. "This is interesting," she said finally. "What did you find?" Jackson asked. "Several problems with Mr. Blackwood's evidence. First, this survey map is dated 3 months after Mr. Holloway Sr. filed his original claim. Second, these witness statements contradict each other on key details." Blackwood's confidence wavered slightly. "Minor discrepancies don't invalidate the core claim." "Perhaps not, but this does." Adelaide held up a legal document with official seals and signatures. "This is a federal land grant issued to Samuel Holloway in 1847, properly filed, properly witnessed, properly recorded." The banker examined the document with amazement. "Where did this come from?" Jackson's father kept meticulous records. This was filed in the strongbox with other important papers. A man who forged documents wouldn't keep evidence of legitimate ownership. Blackwood's face flushed with anger as his carefully constructed fraud collapsed. That document could be forged as well. It could be, but federal land grants have specific security features that are difficult to replicate. The paper quality, ink composition, and seal impressions all appear authentic. Adelaide's calm analysis impressed the banker and terrified Blackwood. His scheme depended on legal complexity that ordinary people couldn't navigate. He hadn't expected to face someone with actual legal expertise. "Furthermore," Adelaide continued, "creating false federal documents is a serious crime. Perhaps we should involve the territorial marshal to investigate these conflicting claims." The suggestion sent visible panic through Blackwood. Federal investigation would expose his entire operation, not just this single scheme. "That won't be necessary." he said quickly. Perhaps I was mistaken about the documentation. But Adelaide wasn't finished. She had endured a lifetime of powerful men trying to intimidate and deceive her. This one would face consequences for his actions. I think it's very necessary. The people of Clearwater Ridge deserve to know if someone has been manipulating land records for personal gain. Adelaide spread additional documents across the table with the precision of a seasoned attorney. The kitchen had transformed into a courtroom, with her as both prosecutor and judge. Blackwood shifted uncomfortably as she examined each piece of evidence. Mr. Whitmore taught me that fraudulent documents often share common characteristics, she said, pointing to inconsistencies in Blackwood's papers. Notice how these witness signatures use identical pen strokes and ink density, almost as if the same person wrote all of them. The banker leaned closer, studying the documents with new understanding. What had appeared legitimate at first glance now revealed obvious flaws under expert scrutiny. These survey measurements don't match the federal township grid system used in the 1840s, Adelaide continued. They follow the modified system implemented 15 years later. Someone created these documents recently, using current standards rather than historical ones. Blackwood's face grew ashen as his carefully constructed lies unraveled thread by thread. He had invested months in this scheme, bribing officials and forging documents. Now a woman he had dismissed as irrelevant was destroying everything. You seem quite knowledgeable about legal matters for a simple ranch wife, he said with desperate venom. I worked for one of Philadelphia's finest attorneys for 8 years. Mr. Whitmore specialized in land fraud cases. He taught me to recognize every trick. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Adelaide wasn't just lucky or intuitive. She possessed genuine expertise that made her dangerous to men like Blackwood. Jackson watched his pretend wife dismantle their enemy with quiet amazement. This brilliant woman had hidden her capabilities behind a facade of grateful submission. Now she wielded knowledge like a sword, cutting through deception with surgical precision. The most damning evidence is this, Adelaide said, holding up a property deed with official seals. This document claims to transfer ownership from the federal government to a private company. But the signature belongs to a territorial clerk who died 2 years before the alleged transfer date. Mrs. Penwell gasped audibly. Even she could understand the significance of that revelation. Blackwood had forged documents using a dead man's signature. I can explain that discrepancy, Blackwood stammered. I'm sure you can. But explanations won't satisfy a federal investigation. Document forgery carries serious penalties: prison sentences, asset forfeiture, criminal conspiracy charges. Adelaide's calm recitation of consequences terrified Blackwood more than shouting or threats. She spoke with the authority of someone who understood exactly how the legal system would respond to his crimes. The banker examined Jackson's authentic land grant once more, comparing it to Blackwood's obvious forgeries. The difference was stark and undeniable. Mr. Holloway, I apologize for this confusion. Your land ownership appears completely legitimate. The bank will approve your loan application immediately. Jackson felt overwhelming relief wash over him, but kept his focus on Adelaide. She had saved his ranch, exposed a criminal conspiracy, and revealed herself as the most formidable woman he had ever encountered. What about the marriage situation? Mrs. Penwell asked with lingering suspicion. Jackson looked at Adelaide with new understanding. Their arrangement had begun as mutual desperation, but had evolved into something deeper. She had fought for his family's legacy with fierce dedication. He would not abandon her now. Our marriage may have started unconventionally, but it's real now. Adelaide is my partner in every sense that matters. Adelaide's eyes widened with surprise at his public declaration. Jackson stepped closer, taking her hand with obvious affection. I've never met anyone with her intelligence, courage, and integrity. Any man would be lucky to call her wife. The banker nodded approvingly. Unconventional beginnings often lead to the strongest partnerships. Your wife's legal expertise will be invaluable for ranch business. Mrs. Penwell frowned with disappointment at being denied her scandal, but could find no fault with Jackson's sincere devotion. Even she had to admit that Adelaide's performance had been impressive. Blackwood made one final desperate attempt to salvage his position. Perhaps we could reach some private arrangement, avoid unnecessary legal complications. The only arrangement you need is with a good attorney, Adelaide replied firmly. I'll be sending copies of this evidence to the Territorial Marshal and Federal Land Office. They can sort out your legal complications. Defeated and facing criminal charges, Blackwood fled the ranch without another word. His expensive buggy disappeared in a cloud of dust, carrying him toward an uncertain future filled with courtrooms and prison cells. The inspection party departed soon after, leaving Jackson and Adelaide alone in the sudden quiet. The kitchen table remained covered with documents that had changed both their lives forever. You saved everything, Jackson said quietly. We saved everything. Your father's records provided the proof I needed. They stood facing each other across the table, the weight of recent revelations settling between them. Their fake marriage had become real through shared crisis and mutual respect. I meant what I said to the banker about being partners. Adelaide studied his weathered face, looking for deception or obligation. She found only honest affection and genuine admiration. Even knowing about my money, my past, especially knowing those things, you chose to help me when you didn't have to. You fought for this ranch like it was your own. Maybe because it feels like home now. Jackson walked around the table and took her hands in his massive ones. The calluses spoke of hard work and honest labor. The gentle touch spoke of deeper feelings. I'm asking for real this time, not as a business arrangement or temporary favor. Will you marry me, Adelaide Jenkins? Adelaide felt tears threatening as emotions overwhelmed her careful composure. For the first time in her life, someone valued her mind and heart over her money or usefulness. Yes, Jackson Holloway, I'll marry you. They embraced in the kitchen where their partnership had been forged through crisis and revealed through truth. Outside, the ranch stretched toward distant mountains, secure at last under clear Wyoming sky. Tommy's whistle echoed from the barn as he tended the cattle, unaware that his boss had just proposed to the most remarkable woman in the territory. The Triple Crown Ranch would prosper under new leadership that combined Jackson's practical knowledge with Adelaide's sharp intellect. But first they had a real wedding to plan. The Territorial Marshal arrived 3 days later with a federal warrant for Blackwood's arrest. Adelaide's evidence had triggered a comprehensive investigation that revealed fraud schemes spanning multiple counties. Properties had been stolen, families displaced, and honest settlers cheated out of their land. Blackwood's empire crumbled like a house built on sand. His bank accounts were frozen, his associates arrested, his carefully constructed reputation destroyed. The man who had terrorized honest ranchers now faced decades in federal prison. News of Adelaide's legal expertise spread throughout Clearwater Ridge faster than wildfire. People who had scorned her days earlier now approached with newfound respect and nervous apologies. She listened politely, but maintained careful distance from those who had shown their true character. Mrs. Henderson knocked on the kitchen door that afternoon, clutching a basket of preserves. Her children stood behind her, clean and properly dressed for the first time in months. Mrs. Holloway, I wanted to thank you properly. The doctor said my payment covered more than just Billy's treatment. You paid for medicine we couldn't afford. Adelaide accepted the preserves with genuine warmth. Mrs. Henderson had shown kindness before learning about money or status. That made her gratitude meaningful rather than opportunistic. How is Billy feeling? Much better, thanks to you. We'll pay back every penny as soon as we can. Pay it forward instead. Help someone else when you're able. Mrs. Henderson's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. She had expected charity with strings attached, not genuine compassion without conditions. Other visitors arrived throughout the week, each bringing requests for legal advice or financial assistance. Adelaide evaluated each situation carefully, offering help to those with genuine need while politely declining obvious opportunists. The Martinez family brought fresh vegetables and sincere thanks for the mercantile credit that had saved their farm. The widow Thompson asked for help reviewing a suspicious contract that would have cost her everything. Young Sarah Mitchell needed guidance escaping an abusive engagement her father had arranged. Adelaide helped them all, but on her own terms. She charged fair fees for legal consultations, established clear boundaries around her assistants, and refused to enable dependency. The people she helped understood they were receiving professional services, not charity born from desperation. Jackson watched this transformation with growing admiration. Adelaide had learned to value her own worth and demand respect from others. She no longer gave constantly from emptiness, but chose carefully when and how to share her abundance. "You're different now," he observed one evening as they reviewed ranch accounts together. "I finally understand the difference between helping and enabling, between generosity and people-pleasing." Her legal work brought unexpected benefits to the entire community. Adelaide identified fraudulent contracts, exposed predatory lending practices, and helped honest families secure legitimate land claims. Her presence made Clearwater Ridge safer for everyone. Pastor Williams visited on a Thursday morning, his kind eyes troubled by guilt. The elderly minister had allowed social pressure to cloud his Christian judgment. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Holloway. I let others poison my thinking about you and your husband. People see what they expect to see. That's no excuse for a man of God. Your actions have shown true Christian character while I failed to practice what I preach." Adelaide appreciated his honesty more than empty flattery. Pastor Williams had learned from his mistakes and grown as a person. That made his apology meaningful. "We're planning a proper wedding ceremony," she told him. "Would you be willing to officiate?" "It would be my honor." 6 months later, the church overflowed with guests for Jackson and Adelaide's real wedding. Tommy served as best man while Mrs. Henderson stood as matron of honor. Even Mrs. Penwell attended, her earlier suspicions replaced by grudging respect. Adelaide wore a beautiful dress ordered from San Francisco, her wealth no longer hidden but not flaunted either. Jackson had purchased a proper suit that accommodated his massive frame. They looked like what they had become, successful partners ready to build a life together. The ceremony was simple but deeply felt. Their vows spoke of mutual respect, shared dreams, and commitment forged through adversity. When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss that followed erased all memories of their pretend beginning. The reception filled the church basement with laughter, music, and genuine celebration. People who had once scorned Adelaide now sought her friendship and advice. She accepted some overtures while politely declining others, having learned to distinguish between authentic relationships and social climbing. Tommy played his guitar while couples danced on the wooden floor. Children ran between tables loaded with food, prepared by grateful families Adelaide had helped. The community that had once rejected her now celebrated her as one of their own. Jackson found Adelaide on the church steps as the party continued inside. The Wyoming sky blazed with stars that seemed close enough to touch in the thin mountain air. "Any regrets about accepting my desperate proposal?" "Only that we wasted time pretending it wasn't real." Adelaide had established a small law practice in town, the first female attorney in the territory. Her clients respected her expertise and paid fair fees for professional services. She helped people because she chose to, not because she felt obligated. The Triple Crown Ranch prospered under their joint management. Jackson handled cattle operations while Adelaide managed business affairs and legal matters. Their partnership proved that different strengths could create something stronger than either person alone. They had started as two desperate people, making a bargain for survival. They had become partners who respected each other's worth and chose to share their lives willingly. Mrs. Martinez approached with her youngest daughter, a bright girl who reminded Adelaide of herself at that age. "Mrs. Holloway, Rosa wants to learn reading and writing. Would you consider teaching her?" Adelaide looked at the eager child and saw unlimited potential waiting to be developed. She had learned that true generosity meant investing in people who appreciated education rather than simply giving handouts. "I'd be delighted. Bring her by the ranch tomorrow morning." Jackson squeezed her hand with pride. His wife had found her purpose, using her gifts to lift up others while maintaining her own dignity and worth. She no longer gave from desperation, but shared from abundance. The stars wheeled overhead as the celebration continued, marking another chapter in lives transformed by courage, wisdom, and the revolutionary idea that everyone deserves respect regardless of appearance or circumstance. On the porch of their ranch house, Jackson and Adelaide Holloway had built something rare and precious, a partnership based on mutual admiration rather than mutual need.